And so I'll tell you what I mean by that. Um, Two things. One is that toughening up and batting down the hatches can be adaptive or maladaptive depending on the experience. And I'll say what I mean by that. So for instance, if you have a surgeon on the battlefield, for him or her to recognize the human suffering um, that's in front of them and truly take all of that in, might render them unable to help the individuals that are there. And so dissociating in that moment as a defense, as a coping mechanism, is actually adaptive.
Right.
But for that same surgeon to go home and to be with their partner, and their partner gets into an argument with them and they dissociate, it's now maladaptive.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so being able to think about, one, when a coping strategy is adaptive versus maladaptive, as well as recognizing that we all have our limits. That, one definition of pathology that I really like is when the ability to cope is overwhelmed by stressors in the world. And that can all be relative to a person. Some people can have very low abilities to cope, but don't experience much stressors, and they're overall feeling okay. Other people can have tremendous capacities to cope, but things that happen are just so overwhelming, whether it be a war, a pandemic, um, upheavals of any kind, that that can be very damaging and upsetting and too much for anyone.
Yeah. I think what you're saying reminds me of it's interesting, right? Because like I grew up without a father most of my life, and in some ways I was able to like just bury it and like it's like dissociate. And I think with a lot of my friends, they come to me whenever they're going through like potential divorce or whatever, like whatever traumatic thing they're going through. And then sometimes like I'm just so exhausted by the end of the day that my wife will like most relationships with their spouses would just vent about what's going on at work, and then and then sometimes I'm just like, just tough it out, like why, or like try to problem solve, right? But it's like that's not why she's coming to me.